Today, we are going to be reviewing 4 films: Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, Gold, XXX: The Return of Xander Cage, and A Monster Calls. We're going to be getting in some upcoming film talk and getting to some news, so stay tuned.
Welcome to The Real Review.
Welcome to The Real Review, sponsored by Parametric and Lazy Ape Studios, where you get some of the latest happenings, real thoughts, and perspectives in the world of TV and film. I'm here with Matt. He didn't start the fire, hey? And who am I today, Matt?
And I am with Joel Topher Grace Cunningham.
Topher Grace, really now?
Yeah.
70s show guy.
Yes, and Spider-Man, and a number of other... Oh, Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, one of his more noteworthy productions.
You're not the first person to actually call me that, is the sad reality of it.
When I first met you, I told my wife, I was like, he kind of looks like Topher Grace. And she's like, yeah, I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
So, hey.
I've been all over the map. You know, on a good day, I get Bradley Cooper's younger, not as good-looking brother. Yeah.
Really?
And then on a bad day, I tend to get Harry Potter. So I've gotten Elijah Wood as well. I mean, do you get anybody saying what you look like?
No.
Oh, all right. We'll
No.
make you a Matt Hay because
Okay.
you've got your own look. You've got your own style and feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so for all of you that are listening in or for our very first times, greetings and just welcome to the podcast. For those who are listening for the very first time, this is a podcast where we deal with film and television, and we talk about things in a way where we kind of try to find the middle road between the fan and the critic perspective. So we give you both a little bit of a fan perspective on Matt from Matt's side of things, and I tend to be a little bit more critical at times. And so
Yes.
we kind of try and find that middle road with our perspectives. And we also wanted to let you know we are ending something. We are having an ending to our contest, which we've been doing, our launch contest this month. And so, Matt, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yes. So if you're listening to this, that means it is the very last day to get on board with
January
this.
31st.
Yes, January 31st. So if you're listening to this and it's January 31st and you haven't signed up, I don't know why you haven't signed up yet. It's a chance to win a $50 gift card to a movie theater of your choice. All you have to do is subscribe, write a review, hopefully a good one, and then email us at realreviewmedia@gmail.com, just letting us know that you did that. And that's it. Then you're entered. And then we're going to pull names from a magical top hat. And,
magical internet top hat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's it. Get registered because today is the very last day to make that happen.
Absolutely. And we would love to give you that $50 and have you win. So definitely get signed up. It's super simple, as Matt indicated. And, we also want to just encourage you guys, if you want to know more about us and news and things that are happening throughout the week, you can definitely check out our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/realreviewmedia. And we have a website, realreviewmedia.com. It's a great place to get connected as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so with that, Matt, why don't we get right into things and start reviewing some films? So the first film we are going to be talking about today is Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. And Matt, this is a film I actually have not had the fortunate or, unfortunate opportunity to see quite yet. So I'm going to let you lead off with this one. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the film and your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. So to give you a quick synopsis on it, so it's picking up right after the events of the previous Resident Evil film, which was Resident Evil Retribution. And so Mila Jovovich, she's the only survivor of what was meant to be humanity's final stand against the undead and the Umbrella Corporation.
Sounds like a great start for any film.
Right. So there's a lot of backstory. If you've seen the other Resident Evil films, I can't even go into explain all of it. There's just a lot of stuff.
Believe it or not, there's a lot to the story.
Right.
Yes.
But it stars Mila Jovovich, and she's the main character. It's also written and directed by her husband, who is Paul W.S. Anderson, and they've actually done the last 3 together, I believe. Paul W.S. Anderson has been a part of the team, not necessarily directorial every time, but the last 3 that they have, or they've been doing that together, kind of a fun little side project that they're doing. Anyway, so this is the final chapter. And as you heard, if you listen to this show, the very last podcast that we were talking about,
yes,
I expressed my excitement for this for this film.
You were super excited.
I was excited.
This is your guilty pleasure, as you called it.
This series is a guilty pleasure series for me. I've enjoyed all of them, some more so than others up to this point. Joel, I watched this movie and I came out of it hating it.
What?
I hated this movie.
Oh, that's so sad. I feel like I should have put some money on this.
So I was so disappointed. I went with a friend. I said, this is not going to be a good movie, but I'm expecting to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's what I told him. And he said, me too.
Yeah.
And I hated it. And I told him that at the end, and he was like, yeah, it just wasn't, it was the worst one. I agree. It was the worst one out of all the Resident Evil films. And again, I wasn't expecting it to be, an Oscar movie,
Yeah.
But going in, okay, there are a number of different problems with it.
Okay.
If I could describe it in one word, I'd say incoherent.
Okay.
The biggest thing is that I had to actually physically close my eyes during the action sequences. The way in which they were edited and filmed, there were so many little jump cuts. Like in one action sequence, you had like 100 different angles, and and each camera shot was only like a fraction of a second.
Were they using any type of shaky cam?
It was shaky.
It was.
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
And so it was shaky.
Shaky.
It was blurry.
With quick edits. That's not good usually.
I had to close my eyes because it was hurting my head. Like you couldn't tell what was happening. And that's just part of it. Not just incoherence with like what's happening on screen, but also the plot.
Yeah.
There was a lot of continuity issues. A lot of that is with the editing, not just in the film. Like there's one scene where this tank is driving. It's like a tank-like thing. The tank is driving and there's a bunch of like zombies on either side of it.
Yeah.
But they show a cutaway and there's no zombies on either side of it. They're like 30 feet behind it. And that's just one example of many.
Continuity.
But it's not just continuity in this. It forgot everything that it set up in all the previous films.
Right.
I'm pretty sure they either forgot or just got really lazy on the story making element of it. The dialogue is the worst that I've heard. They set up all these like unnecessary like relationships.
Wow.
And they want you to care for these people that you didn't just meet 5 minutes ago, but the main character just met 5 minutes ago. And, and they want you to feel sad for something that happens to them,
Yeah.
And so there's no payoff for anything, and they try to add this like really clever twist at the end of it. It doesn't work. It's very cheesy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they were setting it up for sort of another final chapter, or do you feel like they were just kind of trying to do something to get people in an unexpected way?
Right. So they set it up in a way in which they could do another one if they wanted to.
I did call that one.
Okay, but a number of different interviews there with Mila and Paul is they're done.
Right.
They're done with it. They're like, all right, cool, we got the last one done, and you can kind of tell that they had to finish off the franchise. It felt like lazy and rushed, the movie just as a whole.
I would imagine, considering, some of the stuff you're saying, Paul W.S. Anderson did write the last films that he directed as well, and if they're having continuity errors with the script and what happened in prior films, and they were written by him, you'd have to imagine there probably wasn't too much thought put into the scripting of the actual film. Right.
So another thing too is in the last two films that he did with her Resident Evil films, the way they filmed action was an abundance and overuse of like super slow-mo action.
Right. I've seen that before where like they'll throw an axe and it'll do this super slow-motion thing where the axe kind of rotates around the camera.
Which can be really, really cool in the proper doses, right?
Right, yeah.
I miss that so much in this one because I would rather have every action scene be slow motion rather than what I got in this one. It was I've never had to ever close my eyes like that in a movie before and just be like, I can't even, it hurts my head.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That is crazy. So I would say on a scale of, 1 to 100, where would you rate this one?
36. It's an F
for
sure.
Wow.
I'm not usually this harsh on movies, but for me to go in expecting a bad movie and to get something worse, I feel like is bad. It's really bad.
Any good elements? Anything that you liked?
It's done, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm actually hoping this thing gets rebooted in the next 5 to 10 years, but done in a more serious way.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to, it just continues on the cycle with bad video game movies, in kind of if you want to contrast it to something that came out earlier, was Assassin's Creed, for example. Assassin's Creed, I wouldn't give too much of a better grade, and I'd probably give it a D. Just because you don't care about any of the characters, and some of the way that some of the choices they made in the filmmaking process of the story elements was really a bummer. But this Resident Evil as a whole, I enjoyed up until this, and then just super let down.
Well, it's good to know, and it's something that I will be doing my best probably not to check out then anytime soon.
That's all that I have to say about that. So let's go ahead and how about you tell us about the next one we have, Joel?
Yeah, so the next film we're going to be talking about today is a film that I got to see, and Matt, you unfortunately have not had the chance to see this yet. Fortunately or unfortunately at this point. We're talking about a film called Gold, which is directed by Stephen Gaghan. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that at this point. And it stars Matthew McConaughey, Edgar Ramirez, and Bryce Dallas Howard. And it basically tells the story of Kenny Wells, who's a prospector and desperate for sort of a lucky break, if you will. And he teams up with this similarly eager geologist and sets off on a journey to find gold in the uncharted jungles of Indonesia.
Wow.
And so I'll start off with the good on this film. This was a bit of a mixed film for me. I was kind of excited for it. I thought it had some pretty interesting elements. I felt like the trailers were difficult for me because I thought that Matthew McConaughey's character in particular was a bit off-putting, to say the least, the way that he was embracing things.
Right.
So when I went and I saw the movie, what I really was left feeling with is that it kind of felt like a great film in concept, but tonally, overall, the film itself kind of missed for me. I think there was some really good story elements and some really interesting aspects of dealing with where this went. And it was always leaving me guessing, suspensefully. There was actually a fair amount of suspense guessing, like, what is the intent of this person? What are they really trying to accomplish? Are they going to betray this person? Are they going to... So there was a fair amount of intensity in regard to that. And I thought they did a really good job of keeping you guessing all the way throughout the story, all the way to the end, even when you're kind of left feeling like, is this what this is, or is it not what it is? I don't want to give too much away.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of suspense.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. And so that was probably the biggest strength of the film, if you will. And I would say as well, there was definitely a couple times where cinematography-wise, this is where it kind of gets into the unknown territory, or a little bit hit or miss territory. The cinematography at times was great, but then at other times I was actually amazed to see there was a couple shots that were really out of focus. There was a couple shots in particular, especially in Indonesia, and maybe they were having lens trouble or camera trouble or something, but the shots themselves looked like they were having some sort of weird like aberration issues, like there was a disattached lens or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like really surprised to see that on like a, major motion picture kind of film.
You don't find it was like purposeful or anything like that?
No, that was what I was kind of wondering, but then when I really thought about the shots, there was really no reason to leave those as blurry and as unclear. I mean, there was one shot where it's literally Matthew McConaughey is looking out into this kind of like expanse of, when they're first in Indonesia, and he's showing him where they're going to be going, and they're going to be looking for, Edgar Ramirez's character, Michael, showing them where they're going to be going, and they're going to be looking for this gold.
Okay.
And the shot was like really blurry the first third of it, and then it kind of clears up. And I thought, well, maybe they're using some kind of like focus pull technique to kind of add interest, but there was really no purpose for it. Yeah.
So weird.
And that happened like 3 or 4 other times, only within Indonesia though. Everywhere else it was kind of fine. So that's kind of the maybe good, maybe bad. There was definitely some shots that were really pretty and beautiful and really done well and artistically. Then we get into the territory of, now that's just awful. And I would say, unfortunately for me, and this was really sad, was Matthew McConaughey's character was just totally a flop for me in this role. Yeah, I think I can appreciate what he was going for. He was going for real commitment to this character and real commitment to this role. He plays this character, Kenny Wells, who it's kind of this film is kind of an amalgamation, if you will, of what actually happened. It's based upon a true story of this mining company that kind of rose up and had this find in the jungles of Indonesia, and then it turns out that the find had actually been falsified. It had been a fake find, but through this, a lot of people had invested a ton of money into it, and they'd kind of been a bunch of people, and that's why I was saying there's a lot of suspense there of wondering, okay, is this person really aware of what's going on? Are they faking things? Are they telling the truth? And so there was suspense there, but his character was kind of this amalgamation of this other character that had been the main person of that original true story. And I don't know if he was basing it, I haven't had a chance to really look into that story enough, but I don't know if he was basing it upon that man, but he went for this kind of almost like hick, kind of Southern down on his luck, drunkard type character. And he had this thing with like a buck tooth that kind of stuck out, outside of his mouth. And the sad thing was for me is that I wasn't able to distract myself from Matthew McConaughey enough, the Matthew McConaughey-isms.
So you saw him.
Right. I saw him and I saw him as the character.
Right.
Whereas I feel like if this had been another person that we maybe weren't as familiar with, you really might have been able, maybe if they played a character that really embraced those kind of feelings more,
right?
You might have been able to get more behind that type of a character and that type of a reality.
Right.
So it was bad in that sense, and I think that he kind of flopped it a little bit. I think he did a decent enough job acting it, but I just really don't think he looked the role very well.
Gotcha.
And I think a lot of the internal struggles that were there with the plot really came from the fact that you didn't really know what kind of story it was trying to tell. It was suspenseful in the sense that you're wondering who's doing what to who and why.
Yeah.
But it really fell apart in the sense that when I left the film at the very end, the final feeling that I had wasn't, okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to get from the film. It felt very disjointed, and I felt very much like I don't know what I was supposed to leave with, what's supposed to theme, what like idea.
Yeah.
Theme goes down to basically how people interact with each other. What's the human condition and how they're going to treat each other. Yeah. And it left with a very kind of somber, sad taste of what people would do and how they would treat each other. But there's this weird kind of almost upliftingness at the same time to the film.
That's weird.
Like that a person can do these horrible things unconsciously or unknowingly and fall into really bad things, but maybe it'll turn out well for them. But it really was more of a question mark.
Huh.
So I would say overall on a scale of, A to F, I gave this one about a C-.
Okay.
I think it hit around like the 73, 74 mark. I think if they had even a better character, a non-Matthew McConaughey type character in the role, I probably would have given it maybe closer to a B kind of rating, a B-.
Maybe if it was Topher Grace.
Yeah, if it was Topher Grace, yeah. Now, the funny thing was I actually really thought Woody Harrelson might have been able to get it.
Absolutely.
He kind of has that goofy lovableness to him.
Goofable. That could be a new word. Yeah.
The goofableness. And I really think, to keep with that, I really think Matthew McConaughey's not the goofable kind of guy. He definitely plays kind of like the silly, lovable, charming character, whereas, Woody Harrelson more plays like the down on his luck kind of bad, but he's probably filming Wilson or something else. So, and the other thing that I noticed when I was looking into this more and more is that the actual writers for this story, and I'm guessing the director probably had a bit of writing credit for it as well, but you had Patrick Massett and John Zinman, and both of these guys, if you look at their writing credits, the first film that they really did was Tomb Raider.
Oh yeah,
which is
oh yeah, that's
nailed
quality
it with that
right
one.
there.
Yeah, and then after that, they really did a series of mostly television shows. They did Friday Night Lights, they did Blacklist, they did a bunch of other ones, Last Resort, The Finder, and it felt like a television show in a lot of ways. It felt like episodic. It felt like they were trying to include a bunch of different characters with their own stories that were kind of jumping in and jumping out and kind of all going in their own direction. And I think that tonally didn't fit the story.
Right.
It felt like they needed to have a much more straightforward sense of tone and feeling with the overall story.
That can happen. Some TV to movie transitions can happen. Russo brothers, great example of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess it's not working out in their case for Gold.
Yeah, I guess not, unfortunately.
So I may not be going to see Gold.
Yeah, maybe not.
But you were so fortunate enough to see another film.
I don't know if fortunate's the word that I would use, Matt.
So tell us about this, Joel.
Yeah, so I believe you're referring to XXx, The Return of Xander Cage.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, so this film is directed by DJ Caruso, and it's basically the story of Xander Cage. Well, I will say this is a sequel of sorts to two prior XXX films, and it basically, the story revolves around Xander Cage, who's left for dead, air quotes, after an incident, though he secretly returns to action for a new tough assignment with his handler, Augustus Gibbons. It stars Vin Diesel, Donnie Yen, Deepika, I can't pronounce this one, Deepika Padukone?
It's okay, I forgive you.
Yeah, and a bunch of other actors and actresses in this film, and overall I would just give you my synopsis right now.
Wait a second, because even in the synopsis, he's like a secret agent.
Yes,
and then in the synopsis it says he gets assigned a tough assignment.
Yeah, well, tough is a relative term, is what I'm finding in the world of Xander Cage. I think the thing that somebody pointed out to me, which is so true about this, is that Vin Diesel likes to like basically start a series and then let it go down the drain and then try and come back and like save it.
Yeah.
So like he did the same thing with the the Fast and Furious
yep.
series. And this is, I would say, not a return to strength for him, Vin Diesel. Overall, like I said, I think the film failed on a lot of accounts. I think the film was trying to do this thing where, and this happens with these types of action films, where they're trying to go for silly, fun, tongue-in-cheek kind of comedy action. And the unfortunate sense with this film is that you still need a bit of suspense. You still need a bit of, okay, wow, this is crazy, this is awesome. This film was so unrealistic and so just off the wall stupid to me at times that there was no way that I had any sense of suspense, any sense of just emotional connection or reality to the type of film that this was trying to be. So, Vin Diesel plays this character that basically, at the very beginning of the film, Samuel L. Jackson is this guy from the very first film that kind of brought in Vin Diesel's character, Xander, to be this XXx character. He's like this undercover agent guy, right? Yeah. And so in this film, it starts out with Samuel L. Jackson. I was actually really surprised to see Samuel L. Jackson revising his role in this. And the funny thing was, I'm going to spoil this, I don't really care, but like after the first 5 to 10 minutes, he's killed. And that's like, literally, it's like, hey, Samuel L. Jackson, and Samuel L. Jackson's dead.
Man.
And it's kind of how this whole film was for me. I was like, hey, look at that. Okay, and that's dead.
Oh my gosh.
It was literally this kind of like section of really silly set pieces that kind of led to an even sillier set piece of action that was supposed to take place. And they were trying to do these things where they were trying to do like double agents, where it's like, okay, well, now I'm on this side, and now I'm on this side, and now I'm going to betray you for this side. But nobody cared. That was the problem. Nobody cared. Nobody that was in the movie seemed to care about which side people were actually on. Nobody that think that was watching the movie seemed to care about which side people were actually on. And they have this one thing, which is, they do this in a lot of movies, but it was like the MacGuffin. It was like the item that they're using to, basically the idea with the MacGuffin is that it controlled the satellites somehow. And they never showed the guy. They never showed how they created it. They never showed where it came from. Basically, this guy in his basement or something created this device, which is somehow able to crack into military level grade systems that probably run on their own like system, but somehow is able to hack into those and control all of the satellites that surround the entire world and have them crash land in different places of their choosing.
Seems reasonable.
Yes, very reasonable, And so they never even explain how that happened. Like, that's a film right there, explaining how something like that is made, but they just kind of gloss over this. So that kind of tells you maybe the bar to which this film is setting itself. So yeah, Matt, I know you said you had some questions for me about this film. What are those?
So, okay, I already said this. I saw the first one when I was young, very young. And I didn't see the second one. I had no interest in that. This one I thought was going to be like what they were going for. Fun, dumb action movie. Now, after your synopsis and after your review of this film, does this tie into the Fast and Furious franchise at all?
That would have been an amazing twist.
Right.
I would have actually loved that.
I know.
If they had somehow tied those two together. And I'm surprised they didn't try and do that, because that would have helped the franchises, I think, for both. They would have just had an ongoing universe for them both to be in.
Wait a minute. Dom Toretto is also XXX. Crazy.
The biggest twist with something like that was, Ice Cube makes an appearance close to the last.
He's in the previews. That's not even a twist.
Right. Well, and that was the dumb thing, is the film decides to treat this like it's a huge twist. Like, it's like,
in the marketing.
Oh my gosh, Ice Cube shows up and saves the day, which, first of all, he didn't need to save the day. He didn't need to show up when he did. And it's not a surprise when you put it in the marketing and when you actually put him in credits and everything like that. And so there was a lot of stuff in this that I was just really unfortunate. Donnie Yen, I love Donnie Yen. He is one of my favorite martial arts action guys. He was in a film called Ip Man, which is probably my favorite action kung fu movie of all time.
And Rogue One.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great actor, and I felt like he was really miscast for this. I think it really looked like he was phoning it in, and that was kind of the thing that I felt like all of it. And I think this film as well, and obviously it probably would do this, but it really disrespected women in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously you're going to expect a little bit of that with this kind of like debonair rogue agent type thing.
Right.
But Vin Diesel's this character where he like literally walks into a room and every single girl is just like immediately attracted to him, and it's for like no reason, just immediately, just like I have to sleep with this man. It doesn't. And there's a scene that comes in about, it's like a fourth of the way into the film. I know we're getting way down a bunny trail here, but he walks up to this girl, and they're doing this thing where it's like, oh, well, of course they're gonna sleep together. She's interested in him. He's gonna, and so she's like, no, you're not gonna sleep with me. Instead, you're gonna sleep with these 7 girls. Like it just doesn't even make sense. It's just like, yeah. And so the whole film, I think it's just derogatory towards women in a lot of ways. I think it. It's a discredit to a lot of the people that were involved in it, and I would say very strongly, don't go see this movie. I don't think it needs to be seen. And here's what I would say. We talked about this in the very beginning. Fun action. There's a way to make a film that can be non-suspenseful but can be fun, maybe.
I would say the Fast and Furious films are pretty good at that.
Absolutely, yeah. But there has to be a reasonable suspension of disbelief in order for a film to be fun action. And this film goes so far into the craziness and the stupidity and just the convolutedness of making no sense with the characters and just like, well, it's going to be this way because we said it's this way, that it removes that suspension of disbelief so far that it can't be fun for me.
Yeah. So if you had to rate this, what would you rate this film as?
Pure F.
F. Oh, nice.
Absolutely.
As you can tell, we have a pretty good string of ratings today.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we have an F, a C-, and another F.
Yes, we've been hitting a lot of really rough films recently.
Okay, well, it's January.
Hits,
right.
So, Matt, why don't we move into a different film then? A film that we're both kind of a little bit happy about and excited to talk about. Matt, why don't you take us on this one?
Yeah, so this movie actually came out a little while ago, but you and I recently had the chance to see it. And
we had to search for a film that was positive that we could both talk about.
Right. Yeah. So it's A Monster Calls. Okay. Yes. So it's directed by J.A. Bayona, who he did, I believe he did The Impossible.
Yes.
He also did The Orphanage.
Yep.
And he's also working on the upcoming Jurassic World sequel. And so... in addition to that, just the synopsis of the movie simply is a boy is seeking the help of a tree monster to cope with his single mother's terminal illness. Now, just that synopsis in itself, you're like, okay, I don't know about that. Until you see marketing to understand exactly what's happening.
Sounds a little strange.
Right, but it stars Louis McDougall, Sigourney Weaver, Felicity Jones, and Toby Kebbell. Mm-hmm. And I was really, really impressed with this movie, Joel.
Yeah.
Just really, really impressed. And we talked about it previously a couple shows ago about, for me, it being one of my more anticipated ones of the last year, the ones from the last year that I wanted to see. And it hit me. It was a heavy movie. Yeah. I mean, just in itself, just a boy having to deal with his mother's terminal illness. I have 3 young boys at home, and so I was able to relate with it on that level. Man, it hit me emotionally pretty hard.
Yeah.
I was, trying to get the mist out of my eyes for the good, last half of the movie, you know. But it was done so incredibly well. There's a visual flair that J.A. Bayona brings, and he comes from that kind of horror thriller background vibe, and there was some real like shots that you would see in a horror movie, especially when the boy's walking to the window and the very first time that the tree monster comes to life.
When he's first coming to life.
This feels like a horror movie. It had that vibe, that sensibility. There were other shots in there as well that had that sense, and it wasn't a scary movie. This movie wasn't scary, but I thought that visual flair added a lot of weight and kind of gravity to the scenes. And
I mean, you think of the nightmare scenes that the boy's going through. Right. That's kind of how it starts, and it's kind of a reoccurring nightmare that the boy's going through. And those scenes are pretty intense. Yeah. Those can be pretty scary.
Yeah. And just as a whole, I thought it was just really well done. Every single part of it, I don't have, now you might have more, but I don't have any complaints.
Yeah.
There's one exception. First off, let me just say the little boy who plays Connor, his name's Louis McDougall, so good.
Yeah.
So good
really,
in this
really
role.
Good job, yep.
Also Felicity Jones, we last saw her in Rogue One, but she was really, really good in this as well. Toby Kebbell was in it. He didn't have as big of a role. I do like him in everything I typically see.
Yeah.
But that brings me to the one weak link. The one thing that I didn't fully hop on board with was Sigourney Weaver's role as the grandma.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about it.
I think it was her voice.
It was her voice, right? So her accent it was like she was trying to do a British accent, but it wasn't a British accent.
Correct. Yeah.
Like it should have been a British accent because every other person in her family was speaking with a British accent.
Yes. Yeah.
But she was trying and it didn't sound like it. It was really weird. I was whenever she spoke, I was like, wait, what is happening? Where is she from?
Yeah. It sounded like she was doing a bad version of a person with a British accent. I mean, that's the best way to put it. I think that whoever she did voice coaching with, or if maybe she didn't, maybe that's part of the reason why she just kind of failed with that. And it really, whenever she was on screen, it unfortunately worked to really take you out of the moment and take you out of the character, because you're thinking, who is she British? What kind of voice? So you can't, it's harder to connect with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, the only other thing I'd have to say about this is it's such a good movie, such a well-made film. I wish it would have seen some more Oscar nods.
Yeah.
It didn't get any Oscar nods, and I thought, my own personal opinion, I think it's up there with all the nominees.
Absolutely, yeah.
But other than that, I don't know if the rewatchability is there. I don't know if it's a movie I would want to watch again, because it's such a heavy film.
Yeah.
But I really, really liked it. And just for me, right off the bat, if I were to rate this thing, I would give it an A-, like a 92. I really, really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, so I kind of see, I'm right in line with you with pretty much everything you're saying. The film itself, I put up there with, a Manchester by the Sea, not a Manchester by the Sea. It's one of those films that it's like, you're glad you watched it and you're glad you went through what you saw, but at the same time, it's probably not like an entertaining film where you're going to like, hey, just sit down with the family and watch this.
Hey guys, come on over, we're hanging out and watching Monster Calls.
Absolutely. But there's a relatability to it, and there's a connection to it that you don't often see and you often get in films. And it happens with really good films. And this film was such a tight film. And I don't mean that in like the sense of like, oh, everything was just really tight focus or something, but like everything that happens in the film builds on itself. Right. And it all points you towards this direction and this conclusion. And it leaves you with the sense that when you finally get there, of the weight of that, of the heaviness of that. And having been somebody that, has gone through this experience of, losing a father, there was a relatability to the way that they handle that, which was amazing, because it's this young kid, Louis McDowell can't be, I don't know, more than like 10, 11, 12, maybe around that age.
Something like that.
So you're thinking, how could you relate to this young child's story? But the way that he approaches that is so realistic.
Yeah.
And it's so honest, but they do it in a very clever way where they try to, with the different stories that the Liam Neeson monster character, so the voice of the tree is Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
Which I thought worked for me pretty well.
Oh, so good.
He tells these stories to the boy, and you're kind of left with, how is this going to relate? How is that going to connect? And the way that it all kind of informs things later on in the story is so rewarding, and is so just intelligently done. And you get a real sense of the cohesiveness of the characters, that the characters are going on this story arc. They're each going in their own direction. Even the relationship between, the mom and the dad, which is Felicity and Toby, you get this real sense of, they're divorced in the story, and you get to understand kind of, why they are, why they're divorced and why they're not there with each other.
Right.
And they're both trying to handle this experience for themselves, but also pointed towards the kid, towards, Lewis's character, Connor, and basically make this as acceptable and as okay as it can be to him. And so there's just a couple moments in the film, I mean, when he's, breaking everything, and when he's just, things are really happening close to the end of the story. I don't want to give too much away for people, but you really just are like, man, this is so good. It's so hard, but it's like, I'm glad I experienced that, and I'm glad that I saw that. And I am personally really sad that, I really do feel like this is one of those films that probably should have been included for some award, best original screenplay, maybe even best actor nod for Lewis. I'm really sad that that didn't happen, but I think it's a great film, and I think it's a good sign of things to come for J.A. Bayona. I think a really good sign, hopefully, of what's going to happen with Jurassic World. Maybe that'll add what I was missing from Jurassic World for me, which was a sense of depth. It felt like a very kind of just passable script.
And maybe a little bit more terror, like kind of adding that heaviness to it.
Yeah, the tension, the build-up, And there was a couple moments like that with Jurassic World, but it was always kind of resolved just super quick.
Right.
And then we're kind of like on to the next action scene. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. I as well would probably give this around an A-. I think
awesome.
the big thing was Sigourney Weaver. I thought that there was some amazingly intelligent and well-done cinematography as well. I think some of the shots that they did, especially with like the way that they're wrapping in the story with the real world, was really cool, with the paint, that he's a painter, but the stories that he's hearing because it makes sense later, but why the stories look similar to what he's drawing.
Right, yeah.
I thought that was really awesome. So just really good stuff. So that is going to wrap up our conversation about A Monster Calls. Let's go ahead now and move into our next section, which is going to be our upcoming film talk. And we're going to start things off with what film, Matt?
Right, so we're going to talk about The Rings. The Rings, I should say Rings, because...
it's not a sequel to Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Yeah.
That would actually probably be better idea.
Potentially.
Yeah. But this week you can actually look forward to seeing a few movies, but more noteworthy, Rings and The Space Between Us.
Yes.
So let's start off with Rings. Okay. I don't know what your history is with this franchise. I know you're not a big horror guy.
Correct.
But for me, I liked the first Ring movie. I thought it was pretty scary. The second one was okay, not quite as good. They relied a little bit too much on some different effects in the second one. This film doesn't have anybody that we know. Mm-hmm. This film has been delayed a number of times already. And they're finally getting ready to release it. There's no, I haven't heard of any press screenings happening for it, and the embargo.
Very bad sign.
I know, and the embargo lifts like much later, like right before the movie comes out for reviews, which that just means that people aren't allowed to talk about it yet.
Which is usually a very bad sign. People probably know this, but if a studio that is releasing a film basically says that we don't want anybody from the press talking about it before it comes out, that's usually a bad sign, because that usually means there's not good press that's going to be associated with
They
it.
don't want people saying bad things about it and keeping people away from the movie when it opens.
It's very rarely that they have great things to say and they don't want anybody saying it.
Right. So the trailer for it and all the marketing's been extremely generic. Mm-hmm. There's maybe one scene that's kind of like cringeworthy, like, oh, okay, that's kind of like a good horror scene, but that's really it. The best marketing I've seen for this film is they did this like prank spot where they had like all these TV set up, and they had like the girl in like a fake TV crawl out at customers.
Oh, I did actually see that. I thought that was pretty funny.
I thought that was really funny. I've seen that done with a couple other films, but I really like that. And I have this feeling that little prank is going to be the best part, probably better than the movie actually is. I don't know. I'm typically the optimistic one, but I'm not optimistic about this.
Well, we'll give a brief synopsis here. So this is basically a young woman finds herself on the receiving end of a terrifying curse that threatens to take her life in 7 days, which is the standard synopsis for every Ring movie. And it's directed by F. Javier Gutierrez. It stars Vincent D'Onofrio. There you go. Laura Wiggins and Amy Teagarden, and probably a large cast of other people that are going to be dead by the end of the film. And so I'll say this, Matt, I didn't see the first film. I actually haven't seen anything in this.
Okay.
I was a bit not excited about when I heard about the concept of it. I was immediately feeling like, okay, just immediately it doesn't make any sense to me. So I just don't get the reality of somebody having a video that you would watch that would somehow result in you answering a phone that would then result in you dying 7 days after that.
Dude,
so,
it's not a true story, man.
I know. I mean, it's weird because, we joke about like Lord of the Rings, but it feels almost like it would have to be like a Rings type scenario where people are like obsessed with like maybe the film like draws them in, so they like have to watch it or something. I don't know how that scenario would play down. If you're gonna watch something and then you're gonna die, then that pretty much would mean the end of that happening after that point, I would think. At some point,
how it keeps getting like passed on.
Right. I don't have people randomly coming up to me in the street saying like, here's a VHS tape, or like, going over to the house and seeing a VHS tape and be like, I should watch that,
You're so old. What's a VHS tape?
Exactly.
So that's a thing too. In the first two films, it revolves around this VHS tape.
Right. Yeah.
We are so past that now.
Right. Yeah. And I believe this is an online tape now. So
it's
updated it.
It's like when somebody sends you like a spam email saying, hey, open this link.
Right. Which is more realistic, I would say.
But
I mean,
who
you get
does
that
that
stuff.
still?
I don't know. I mean, the only thing that I could think is that this, there's this poor girl, I guess, that's associated with the curse, that maybe she has a Facebook account and she's sending it out like it's hot and she's boosting it so she's getting extra views, or I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe this movie is going to be the best movie of the year and we just don't know know yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the director, so you've got him on board and looking at his kind of credits, and it doesn't mean it's bad, but he has really nothing to his name at this point that has really done pretty much anything significant. And his last film that he actually directed was in 2008. So, he's going on almost 10 years of having no directorial credit, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but isn't a great sign. And then additionally, if you look at some of the writers, you've got writers that actually haven't written anything since 2017. I think the most recent writer that you have is Akiva Goldsman, and he actually does, and he is, I would say, a pretty decently credited writer. I mean, he's got some credit for A Beautiful Mind and I, Robot. So he could potentially be a good writer, but you've got a team of other people that I'm just like, I'm not too sure about this. You've also got a guy named David Lauka, who doesn't have a writing credit to his name since 2012, and his last writing credit was House at the End of the Street. And so it's just, it doesn't necessitate that it's going to be a bad film, but it's a bad sign to start with if you've got these potentially not great writing credits that are associated with it. You've got a director that hasn't done anything in almost 10 years. So I'm just going to leave this one at my probably not to see.
Yeah,
list.
right. So here's another thing too. And just because I like the horror side more of things, I think this last year, if anything, has proved that you can do good horror films without having a ridiculously high budget.
Absolutely.
So, and I would point to Lights Out. I would point to Don't Breathe, and even more recently, Split.
Yeah.
Split production budget $9 million has reached $100 million worldwide.
Wow. Yeah.
That's incredible. Rings has spent $33 million in its production. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the best business model for something like that. I think they're solely relying on the Rings brand to carry them forward.
Yeah.
But same thing. Lights Out was one of my favorite horror films last year. It's $5 million production budget, and it made $67 million. So yeah. Anyway, but Rings, not really enthused about it. But that takes us to the next film opening this week, called The Space Between Us.
Yes.
So this film looks kind of interesting. It's about the first human that's born on Mars. And he travels to Earth for the first time, experiencing the wonders of the planet through fresh eyes, and he embarks on an adventure with a street smart girl to discover how he came to be. So the first time I saw a trailer for this, I was actually really intrigued. I was like, that's kind of interesting. So it's science fiction, kind of set in the future a little bit. What would that be like if somebody were born on a different planet? I like the idea of that.
Yeah. And I will say this is outside of the point, but totally stole my idea. I always thought it'd be really interesting to figure out what would happen if somebody actually had a child in space. I mean,
right.
Where are they from? Are they from, I'm guessing the space station outside of the point.
What would be, would you be an alien?
I'm guessing you would be the first official alien. That's why I think it would be so awesome.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was born off of the Earth.
Well, see if you can get your wife to have any interest in potentially that.
So it stars Britt Robertson, Asa Butterfield, who's kind of been an up and comer, but I feel like hasn't fully broken through just yet.
Yeah.
He did Ender's Game, and I thought he was really good in that movie, actually.
Yeah, I thought he did a great
The movie as a whole wasn't
material.
all the way there that I wanted it to be, but I thought he did really good. And I'm expecting some similarities just kind of in how he portrays this role. Britt Robertson, I like. She was in Tomorrowland. I mean, not to say that the movie was great, but I think she's good, and she has some acting chops. And, Gary Oldman too. I don't know. It's random. Sometimes what I see Gary Oldman in, I'm like, why did he choose to do this movie? Because Gary Oldman is a fantastic actor.
Oh, he can be. I mean, Dark Knight, the whole Batman trilogy was great, and
Well, I mean, and just be honest, he's just so good. But after seeing more recent marketing, it does have some of that Lifetime movie feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how it's going to play out. I want it to be a good what if movie. It looks kind of like a cheesy teen romance story with this extra element of, hey, I'm not from Earth. And it affects me negatively in these ways, but let's see how this affects our relationship and learn about the meaning of life, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of similarly minded to what you're saying there at the end. I think it's taking on some somewhat melodramatic type feeling to me. It seems a little convoluted. And it seems a little bit like they're trying to, it's, much ado about nothing. It seems almost like they're basically like setting up this giant hypothetical situation that really could be solved pretty simply, which is basically like, well, go back to space, and it's probably deeper than that. And the character is probably going to have some real good reason for, wanting to stay on Earth to be with this girl. But I mean, is it worth dying for? I mean, that's probably the main point of the story. Is she worth dying for? Is he worth, giving up their life for? We'll see. I mean, it definitely has a bit of like kind of a romantic, sort of dramatic, but the thing with the trailer that I didn't like is that it really felt like it was trying to almost go for this like intense like thriller type thing at moments, and it really just seems like it's more of like a romantic kind of drama,
Right.
like a romantic dramedy type thing. So, and if you look at a lot of the credits, I mean, you have for the director here, which is Peter Chelsom, you've got, Funny Bones, Town and Country, then you have Serendipity, and then you have Hannah Montana, the movie. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, maybe he's got something that he's been, he's got Hector and the Search for Happiness. And that was an interesting film, and it kind of did some good things. So maybe he's got some stuff that he's been wanting to get out with this kind of a film that he hasn't been able to itch and scratch with other types of films that he's been a part of. And we'll see kind of where it goes. I'm not super excited about it. The main writers for this film, the main writer, I should say, not the story by, but the writing credit is for Alan Loeb. And he did Just Go With It, and he did The Switch, and he did 21. And so not necessarily the most exciting writing credits for me either on that one, but I do agree that the cast has some potential. I think I agree. Asa Butterfield, or Asa. Is it Asa?
I don't know.
Asa, you don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think he can do a good acting job. I think Carla Gugino and Gary Oldman can both do a good acting job depending upon the role they're in. I think Britt did a decent enough job with Tomorrowland. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So check it out. If you guys go check these out this weekend, let us know what you thought about them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Shoot us an email. But yeah, that wraps up our upcoming film talk. Next, I want to take a few minutes and talk about a couple of news items that actually dropped within the last day or so.
Yeah.
The first one, and just spend a little bit of time on it because we don't know a lot about this film yet, but they and when I say they, that
the powers that be or
powerful
something.
They released the very first image for Ocean's 8, which is going to be a female-driven cast of the Ocean's 11. It takes place in the Ocean's 11 universe, and it's going to be 8 people this time. And they're going to be pulling off heists. Now, we don't have any synopsis about this film yet.
Yeah.
The one things that we do know, and the image is okay. It's essentially just the people sitting on a train, which I can only imagine they're either going to pull off a heist or they're all going out to eat dinner somewhere together. I don't know, but there are some big names in this movie. You have Sandra Bullock, you have Cate Blanchett, Anne Hathaway, Mindy Kaling, Sarah Paulson, Awkwafina, not your water bottle,
the actor Awkwafina.
yeah. And then Rihanna, and then Helena Bonham Carter, and I hear that, and there are a ton of really, really talented people in that lineup. Yeah. And maybe some that aren't extremely talented, but you could see where they're going. Like, okay, they have Mindy Kaling. Okay, she's probably going to be the comic relief, Yeah. Her and Awkwafina, just because of the way that she has done her comedy stuff on TV. But Sandra Bullock looks like it's going to pull the star. Now, there are some, it's connected to the Ocean's 11 universe. There is some talk that Sandra Bullock's character is Danny Ocean's sister.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't even really know this was a thing. I know
I didn't either. Yeah,
talked about it. I thought
that is news to me.
They said something about Jennifer Lawrence was attached to it at some point in time. I don't know what happened with that, but regardless, I don't know. There's not a lot to talk about other than it's there. I'm excited to see what happens with this collaboration of all these really talented people. Yeah.
I would agree with that. So I will say a couple things. The cast, for the most part, does look okay. There's some good names in there for sure. Rihanna, I'm not super excited about that, but, I'm guessing they probably aren't going to give her a huge role. And if you watch the original Ocean films, which I've seen the original 3, 11, 12, and 13, the cast there was certain characters that had a more prominent role in the film as there needs to be, and then there were certain characters that kind of had more of a backseat type. They were kind of along for the ride, but they had their own developed character. And I think Rihanna will probably be one of those characters, and
yeah.
some of maybe the not greatest actors. If the director knows what they're doing, they'll kind of put the more prominent actors in the more prominent roles.
Yeah.
So, and you have Gary Ross, according to what I'm seeing here, who's on for directing, and I think he's one of those directors that does films that they're weird. They're like a high-level kind of drama. You know, you've got Pleasantville, you've got Seabiscuit, Hunger Games, where it's like they go deep, but they don't go that deep. You know, they're not superly dramatic.
Right.
So he could do well.
I think he could do well.
Yeah, it's a different kind of film for him than what I would expect for him to put together. If you watched, you know, again, the original 1, 2, and 3 films, they had a style, they had a stylistic feel of being very kind of real, but almost kind of like, I don't know what you call it, like casino, like swinging, you know, type things with, you know, the Rat Pack type feel, you know, everything. And I haven't seen that type of thing done recently very much to hit that type of a vibe.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen him do anything like that. So I'm wondering if he's going to try and develop his own sort of, you know, culture and feeling with these movies, with these girls, and the way that they're going to do it. And I don't know. So I kind of need a little bit more info before I think
there's
I can
not
make
a lot
an effective,
out there.
and have an opinion.
Kind of cool to see just a little bit of that process getting started.
And the one negative thing I will say about this for me is that I kind of saw everything I needed to see with Oceans 11, 12, and 13. I didn't feel like there was any elements to the story that I was like, okay, yeah, I hope they pick that up in a later film.
Right,
it was kind of like, all right, I've gotten the idea of this concept.
So here's hoping that they have a good story that kind of brings this other dimension to it. Gary Ross, just a side note, I think he's good, really good on the dramatic side, kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah.
His action sensibilities, I don't think are really there.
Agreed, yeah.
In the Hunger Games, you could see that. Apparently, that's really, in my opinion, where that movie fell flat was when the action sequences kind of happened. But I think he does have the potential to bring this to a place where it can be successful and just good overall. But yeah, that's really it for that. The other piece of news that I wanted to cover was there's an official go to the Splinter Cell movie, which is another video game movie.
Oh, no.
They just don't have a great track record,
video
game movies. But Tom Hardy has been attached to this movie for years.
Yes.
And it just hasn't happened. He's been a busy guy, understandably. Tom Hardy's great. I really like the guy. But it's a go, and the studio is saying that it's going to try and be a departure from the game, which I didn't play the game, so I'm not really attached to it in that way. And they just want it to be a really, really awesome action movie. It's going to be a detached. It's going to kind of go away from the spy element that you might see in like the Bourne films or like the Bond films.
Yeah.
And really be just its own thing. And I think that could be a good thing. I think if it's not relying too many on those like stereotypes and cliches that those types of movies bring.
Yeah.
And even just getting away from feeling like it has to be fan service to the Splinter Cell film or games.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential. I'm so optimistic when there's a new video game movie coming out. And I want there to be a win. I want video game movies to have a win. So I think there's a potential here, but I think we'll just have to wait and see.
Man. I'm sorry I laughed when you said that. I would love for there to be a potential here, but the sad thing about this is, I was holding out hope for Assassin's Creed,
Me too.
The thing is, you've got Michael Fassbender in there. You've got a pretty good production group. You've got a great, overall sense of this film could be something with that film, and it still flopped so hard.
What happened?
And so I would love to say that the fact that Tom Hardy now is part of this project that potentially could mean really good things and really good possibilities, but I don't trust that. We've been disappointed so many times. With this type of film, there's been a lot of big name actors and actresses that have signed up for these video game films, and they've all flopped. Okay, well, if it's not this one, then I'm going to hope and pray for the new Tomb Raider, which is going to be starring Alicia Vikander, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. But so that's really it for the news segments. Awesome. There's not other news, going on right now, but that's all we got for that. Cool. Well, that is going to be all for our podcast then. And we just want to thank you all again for listening in. And it's been really cool to have you guys here listening for this podcast. We just want to mention, can't get that word out here, mention here at the very end, definitely how you can get connected with us. Again, it's the last day to sign up for the contest.
Last day.
And we would love to also hear any questions or comments about anything that we've talked about or any films that we might not have gotten to. We would love to hear thoughts and views on those. You can contact us at our email address, which is realreviewmedia@gmail.com. And as always, real is spelled REEL. And you can connect with us on our website and get connected to our newsletter or get connected with us on Facebook. Our website is realreviewmedia.com and our Facebook page is facebook.com/realreviewmedia.
Nailed it.
Awesome. So anything else, Matt?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, it's been real.
It's been real.